Okay, hello people, welcome to our next webinar. We have today a special guest, Andrea Magnorsky, and she's a programmer, entrepreneur, frequent speaker, and also the architect. And today she will be talking about the Bytesize architecture session, and she will definitely tell us more about that, so I will leave that to her. But one of the reasons why I wanted to have this this session with Andrea is that I feel that quite often our meetings and our design discussions are not effective and not efficient, and I think that bite-sized architecture session is an interesting idea how to facilitate that better. And as I mentioned, we'd like to make it as much interactive as possible. So if you're open, we encourage you to turn on the camera, speak out loud. There will be moments for the questions. The plan for the webinar is that Andrea will start with the introduction. There will be some slots for asking questions during that time. And after that, we will have the classical Q&A session. So if you cannot speak loud or don't want, then also please write your questions on the chat, and I will try to read them as we go. So Andrea, now I think that I will give the voice to you, and if I forgot about something, then also please tell more. So thank you.
All right. Well, thank you, Oscar, and thank you for your very warm invitation. And I can't see many of you, but if you are there, then welcome. And I hope we can, do something interesting to spice up your afternoon or evening with this really exciting thing. So what we're going to talk about, or what I'm going to talk about slightly more, but hopefully you will interrupt me and we can talk to is about sharing knowledge and sharing knowledge incrementally. So as Oscar was saying, my name is Andrea Magnorsky, and I've been programming for over 20 years in industry. And over all that time, I've worked with loads of projects. So one of the things that I've noticed through these projects is that the reason that a lot of the projects that failed or that went less well were that way happened because people working in those projects were thinking that the thing that they were doing were all different things. So basically, they weren't sharing a mental model, right? So sharing a mental model is about sharing knowledge. And sharing knowledge can be difficult, but why? Why is it hard? So also, how do we currently share knowledge? Like, what do you do? Is it good? Is it bad? And by good or bad, I mean, is it effective or not? And why is that? Then, since I created the Bytesize architecture sessions, well, I'm going to give you a brief overview. And then we're going to go through a couple of examples. One, to show you what it feels like to be on your first session, just to kind of make it slightly less intimidating, perhaps. And then an industry example to show you an overarching kind of what happens, what can you do with a few sessions? Obviously trying to keep this short. And after that, there's questions. Basically, if you see me drinking water, which I do sometimes, this is an excellent time for asking questions. So before I told you what the talk about today is, I said that everything kind of came back to shared mental models. And you might be wondering, how can I be so sure about this? And the reason for that is that as programmers, and I'm going to assume that most of you are, have a programming background, you actually ship what is in your programmers' brains. Because as programmers, we encode the system. And if we don't know what the system should do or why, the consequences are terrible. And we all kind of have a very good intuition about this. It doesn't really help that as an industry, we kind of focus a lot on how, because it's quite fun. But we tend to not be rewarded. In fact, we're sometimes punished when we start focusing a lot on why is it that we're doing, and also what is it that we're doing? What are we doing with this? Why are we sending all this data in this API when obviously there's 3 teams that consume it, don't use it? And people go like, well, just if you start getting too much there, we tend to get a bit of pushback because this kind of requires negotiation and you need soft skills, and maybe that's not your job really. So imagine this is just a steady state of sharing knowledge, but there is some added difficulties if you're working in like a kind of most common settings like companies with teams, etc. Even open source kind of situations. Some added difficulties. You're working in a team and half of your team leaves, or just you leave. What happens with that? Then alternatively, you're in one team and you need to coordinate with other teams. Obviously, this becomes harder to share knowledge because the feedback loops get longer. And as we all know, when you have a longer feedback loop, that means that you have kind of loss of fidelity, you're switching context, etc., etc. And that also means that you need to have some way to update your mental model anytime you get new information from external teams. Then you have conflicting long-term plans. This means that, let's say your team has some plan, you're doing some work now and you kind of know what's kind of coming. And then for some reason that it might be super valid, there's a new request. Now, how do you navigate the old and the new? And let's assume that decision-making is not part of the problem, which is, by the way. You still need to update every detail of the old plan to include the new plan, and which bit of the old plan do you actually still need to do? And not only do you need that to do that to yourself, all your team needs to kind of update that as well. And also teams that depend on you that are affected by your changes. And how do you kind of share that information? So as you can see, these 3 added difficulty things are all about like the dynamics, the time going over and things changes just because, that's life. The secret 4th thing here, the role-dependent information variance. Now, this is really interesting because this is about how to make a team generally have different roles. And it could be that one person has multiple roles. But for each role, let's say that you're a product person or an engineering manager, design person, a programmer, each role has a different way to kind of think about, like prioritize what's important and etc. And because they have a different kind of agenda, they also communicate in a different way. And this is kind of only natural, but that also means that updating mental models is a little bit harder. So far we went through why this is difficult. Let's actually explore how do we currently share information. Now, this is kind of a very rough diagram on, how we share stuff, and it could be like verbal or written, protocol, no protocol. You could kind of add a third axis on is it synchronous or not, to just try to kind of get some sort of dimensionality, some sort of kind of visual representation of what we're doing. This is like a landscape. And the idea is that you don't use a single communication method, right? What you're trying to do is think of a combination of them that works for your particular case, right? So if someone asks you, what should you do? What is the way? It highly depends on your team, really, on actually the people involved in it, what works for you. However, one thing that we can do is kind of try to analyze what are the strengths and weaknesses of each one of these knowledge sharing methods. If you're looking at a chat or online chat, basically just having a conversation, you kind of start off kind of going like, well, this is really good and dynamic. However, maybe it's really hard to know about feedback. You don't know how effective your communication was. Also, it's volatile, including online chat, and I know that you can search for stuff. It's not ideal to have to search on Slack for 3 months ago for that time that Oscar said that thing about that other thing. It's just not great. Email has some similar problems there. And then you can go to slightly more structured stuff like request for comments or architecture decision records. Now, these are really, really cool. And again, super useful. And I mean, even today I reposted a really nice post from Jackie that wrote the communications patterns book about historical ADRs. Basically, I'm just saying, hey, these are really good techniques. However, they have a problem. Or I'm not sure it's a problem. It's like, if you want to do this, you want to attach a process to enable people to do these things. For example, how valuable is a request for comment kind of document that you write if either nobody actually gives you feedback, or if there's nothing there to enable you to go and act on that feedback, or people don't just really know what to do with this feedback. People maybe write loads of comments and you're like, I mean, some of these are not really comments, or I actually can never ever do what you asked me. Also, who are you? Why do you care about this? So basically, you kind of need to support this kind of ways of communication. This brings you to a presentation, which is kind of like what it feels like you're experiencing one. Woo! And I mean, you've all been in a presentation before, and the problem, or one of the good things about a presentation is like really good to kind of put a bunch of data in a structured manner out there. Not so good in getting feedback. Like, I have no idea if all of you are just watching pictures of cats or not, which, you know, I wouldn't judge you if you did. Basically, the feedback loops there are a little bit complicated. So that's the thing. So this brings us to a better for feedback type of sharing methods, and that's the pairing or ensemble programming, right? So pairing, I think, is a very powerful tool for sharing, and I'm going to say pairing, referring to both pairing and ensemble. Really good for trying to really get into the details of some sort of programming problem, or trying to come to a solution together. So good feedback loops, you're working together, a bit draining, obviously, so you know your mileage might vary there. But one of the things that people have complained about when it comes to trying to do it often is that people that are not programmers feel like this is not their jam. Not because, you know, it's not like they feel like they shouldn't be there. And at least, again, this is my anecdotal experience. And I think some teams have managed to make it work, but I think it requires some sort of work to make it work at a team level. So this brings us to workshop. So workshop is a meeting at which you're supposed to work, all of you, not just some people. You're supposed to turn up there and actually do some work and feel like it's work. And that's actually where Bytesize comes in. So Bytesize architecture session is a workshop. So a workshop is actually pretty good from a feedback loop point of view. So now, without further ado, what is Bytesize? Bytesize architecture sessions of T is a workshop format, a way to have a highly collaborative meeting that lasts between 45 and 60 minutes. It's recurrent, as in you do it once now, and then you do it again in a week or two. It enables the use of many tools for understanding systems. So this is the T thing that you see here. So you can use a selection of modeling tools like C4, etc. If you're thinking that this is actually pretty straightforward, you're correct. The idea is this is a very kind of general, just a little bit of constraints to make your meetings about systems to be more effective. An interesting thing about this workshops is that I noticed that teams kind of have fun in that kind of board game, cooperative board game type vibe. I don't know if you play those type of games, but if you do, you know how you're all working together kind of against the game instead of oh, Oscar's idea. I mean, I don't like his dog, so his ideas suck. Which is kind of like what can happen in meetings sometimes, that, or, you know, it's hard to, it's too attached to a person. Ideas are too attached to a person, where this kind of tries to get out of that a little bit and try to work together to work on the problem, which is like, what is the system right now? Or what could the system be? What is ideal? Why? How do we bridge these gaps? So I mentioned that Bytesize has a format. This is the format, right? So before the session, ideally a few days before, you do some prep. And that just means invite the right people and make sure they are capable of taking part. Then you have the session itself. And remember, this takes 45 to 60 minutes. In the first few minutes of the session, you decide the goal. And the goal needs to be something that can be completed by one person in a few minutes. So it can't be like massive, right? So it's a small goal. Then you have Alone Together. To do Alone Together, which is like the heart of Bytesize, you set up a timer for like 3 or 5 minutes. And during this time, everyone works individually and quietly on the thing that you just said that you were going to do, right? So on the agreed modeling task. When the timer elapses, each one of the participants explains their own diagram, right? They're like, oh, I did this works with that, blah. It's a little story about whatever it is that they did. And obviously, as other people talk about it, you listen to them and pay attention, actively listening to the other people. So this might be a little bit atypical, but this quiet time allows people to really get into the meeting. Like, I have no idea what each of you experienced, but a lot of us have a lot of meetings. Or you're just working on a deep problem and you're just far away in the land of whatever it is that you were doing. And suddenly you arrive here and you're supposed to pay attention to this route. But you need to draw something, and then you need to show it. So that kind of brings you in the room. So that kind of forces a little bit of more, paying attention to it. So this higher engagement levels on the topics for the rest of the session because of that. Also, this quiet time helps participants really self-evaluate on their perceived understanding of the system. Because when you're drawing this thing, you start going like, wait a minute, does this thing actually links to that thing? Or how does it actually work? So it's easier to realize you don't know something quietly to yourself. And it's quite real because you either can't draw the diagram or you can't. Finally, because you're listening to everyone else, you understand how other people think about this system that you just thought about, right? So you see your own view and you see other people's view. This is a prime thing. Basically, this session, this part of the session, this Alone Together, it's a perfect setup to the next part, which is the longest part of the session. And it's called consensus. The idea here is that you do exactly the same thing that you just did on your own together. So and it takes a much longer time because there is all of you trying to make this work. The difference between any of the single diagrams and the diagrams that is always finished is always quite large. And this is very like active and very, again, this is kind of where this comparison with the cooperative board game comes from, because people go, no, but we should do the thing. And this, no, but wait a minute, did we forget all this stuff? It's kind of like that. Finally, the fourth and last part of the session, and the last few minutes, maybe last 3-4 minutes, you have the summary. This is basically like a mini retro. And the idea is to just gather thoughts from people. And there is no like boundaries on, it could be about what you just learned. It could be like that you enjoyed it or that it didn't work for you or whatever. It's just a mini retro on that. So after a week or two, you just do it again, right? So that's a session. If you're wondering how other people feel, that is not me, this is what Jim, this is someone I work with, said about this. So why would you do this? Well, as you can maybe start to kind of get a feel for it, this kind of alone together and then consensus and trying to work together and trying to model something really tries to drives you towards a more homogeneous system view, right? So it enables kind of learning by introspection and interaction. So you have the two sides of it. The participants build this consensus together, which is quite empowering. I also find that, I don't know if this happens in your team, but in your teams, but there's generally you arrive in a team and there's always, we always ask this one person all the questions, which is really good that you have that one person, but wouldn't it be better if we didn't need to most of the times? So because people start learning the system better, that's less necessary. It's an enabling format. I had kind of anecdotal, people have told me that they are neurodiverse people have told me that they felt quite comfortable in this type of meetings. And I always think that if someone with some kind of social handicaps, let's call it, find this enabling, surely that means that is better in efficiency levels. And finally, and this has been an emergent behavior of the Bytesize, it creates its own design tools. So imagine you've been modeling together and you've slowly created this kind of library of models and diagrams of your system. When you have a new requirement or a new problem or a strange bug, you don't need to go and recreate some image from scratch. You have this library and everyone knows it and agrees that they are correct. And so they become your design tools. So slowly but surely, you're basically building an architecture practice in a safe way. And that is really, really powerful, because what are the alternatives? What are you doing that makes this happen? So how about we go and have a look at our first example? I'm going to sip some water now.
Okay, so as you said, then I will use that for a chance for a question.
Okay.
We have a question from Jackie. Do you ever get any resistance from people not thinking they know enough to take part in alone together?
That is an excellent question. Yes. So sometimes people think that they either don't know enough, or that, especially this happens with other roles like a product, they're like, oh, I just came here to watch. And so I basically what I do is on the prep, I make sure I know who's the team, and if I kind of intuit that this might be a thing that happens, I go to them before the session, make sure that I tell them about what we're trying to do, why is it important, why especially their input is important. In a way, anyone that thinks that's the input we need the most. Mm-hmm. It's like if we go through this example that we're going to go through now, you'll see that the product person, the diagram they make is kind of strange, but also they brought insight that none of the programmers had. Like they just brought 2 or 3 things that just nobody thought about that was really important. Mm-hmm. So the resistance is actually like a signal to something that you should really pay attention to. So excellent question, Jackie.
So if I may add a short follow-up to that, because I see that there might be 2 types of resistance. One is I would call what Jackie wrote like a positive resistance. So that someone don't feel that they have enough value of adding, but if they are encouraged, then as you said, they are more open to give that feedback, and that's quite useful usually. However, some people feel, and that's related to what you said before, that it's yet another meeting, why am I here? Then I will be just I don't think that it's like resistance because we feel that maybe I should not be here, or maybe it's not strictly, or that part of the system design, like quite often we have this in some projects split for backend team, front-end team, or ops team, developer team, and other tech specific discussion. And sometimes people feel that I'm a front-end guy, so I won't care about the backend stuff. So maybe I will just listen with my one ear. And
I kind of, again, I think your question is like, what do you do with resistance from people that feels like they feel obliged to attend, but they don't actually want to take part? I think that would be the my position on that. And again, it kind of depends on the teams and the company, etc. But I tend to think that in a workshop, everyone works, and anyone, because if you let's say, you let someone in that is just kind of listening, and you're like, okay, whatever, then you tend to have another person that turns up and just listen. And it could be listening for other reasons. And then people that are taking part are kind of performing for those people.
Yes.
And so instead of being this thing where you're like focused on trying to do the thing, you're focused on trying to act so that you're doing the right thing. And that just changes things it goes downhill from there. Again, depends on the organization, but I'm always, again, when you see behavior like that, it's kind of like a signal of something that you want to investigate. Why this, it's like, why, if someone feels like they should be there, maybe the best thing is like, how about this? We will take part, and then once we're done and we create this diagram, we can just drive you through it. We agreed already. So if you're not interested, we'll just show you it, and it will take 5 minutes instead of you sitting there for an hour not actually paying attention. What's the value in that? So all these things are, I think they apply to all kind of workshopy type things. If your end result is some sort of decision or consensus, this might be a good way to address it.
Yeah, I think that this tiny size of the meeting is also beneficial, because even if someone wastes a short amount of time, then it's like, hell, if I'm here, then maybe I will contribute. I think that this can be some enabling factor. I'm not sure.
Absolutely. In a way, this is also why I put it in the name. It's like, listen, you come, you work. It's just 1 meeting. How many meetings did you attend that were an absolute waste of time? Do it. If it really was a waste of your time, just don't come back. No problem. You don't have, it's not obligatory. But if you're here, you should take part. Again, sometimes some people really will. In some companies, there's some way in which things can work. But as a general guideline, observers are not, they don't add much, and they remove stuff. So why allow that, right?
Yeah, I think that's, from my experience, quite often people are just, it's an organizational issue, that people are afraid that if they won't show up, then they won't know about the decisions. But I will maybe leave that follow up about that, because I have also a questions about that, but maybe for the further steps. And I will just read what Chucky wrote, that it may be that they are more resistant to presenting their own work if they don't want to get it wrong in front of others.
Well, but this is also, when we're talking about building the practice of architecture together, and it, at the very end of my talk, which you can't see yet, but you will see this, I do mention that it's really important to have psychological safety. It is scary to share with another 7 people what your view of the system is. But what you kind of are trying to do is like, you have done this in 2 minutes. It is very likely wrong. The good news is that everyone else will also get it slightly wrong. In fact, what happens a lot is that, how I mentioned the person that everyone asks to, they make mistakes too. And that is really good for other people to see. Or they are not sure about something. They'll be like, you know what, I think this works this way, but it changed. And if this, God of knowing the system doesn't know, then then you're also allowed to not know. So it's kind of like an equalizer. Also, while you're drawing, they are not speaking because nobody is.
Yeah.
So this is gonna, obviously it's not perfect, right? But the format is trying to kind of address these particular issues. And also it happens at the very start. It's like, does everyone know what is it that we're doing? And it's like, well, yes, and we're 6, 7 people, right? Like there's not like 50 people. Right, okay, so everyone knows what we're doing. Let's go. Everyone quiet, work. And let's see this example actually. So which might be illuminating. Maybe you've seen it, like you read it about it before. But so this example is about this is the very first session that I run for a team that that we were working in a broadcasting company here in the UK. This session ran online. However, you can run it just as easy in person. In fact, I think online is quite nice because you have Miro and people can work separately. You don't have to use Miro. There are many other options. So before the session, we had chat with the EM and a team lead and an engineering manager. That's what I mean by EM. And we kind of talked about what we wanted out of these sessions, and what they wanted was to kind of get the team to be slightly more attuned to what they were building, because they had some new people join in and some changes underneath, and there's this general kind of not feeling so good, and they didn't know if it was because of the system stuff or something else. Anyway, we were like, well, let's try to address the bits that we do know about, which is that they try to get better knowledge of their systems. So because that's what was wanted, we decided to invite everyone that attends stand-ups all the time. Just to kind of, people that speak and are active on the stand-up, they were all invited. So this included a delivery manager, a product person, team lead, an engineering manager, and 4 engineers. So because these participants didn't all know the C4 model, the team lead, they were tasked with, you're teaching them before this session. What you are trying to do here is to make sure everyone attending can participate, right? So in case you don't know or you have never seen it, this is a context diagram of a C4 model. C4 model is basically 4 different diagrams at different levels of abstractions. And if you've never seen it, highly recommended to go and have a look at it. The website is just here, c4model.com. So the idea was to do a context diagram, which is the very highest level of the diagram. So quite simple to do, easy to learn. So the team lead did teach them this. And on the day of the session, we were all ready. We did this in the mirror, and I already mentioned that. And we start off the first step of the 4 steps that I described before, the goal. So in this case, what we wanted to do, because we were trying to do this, getting the team to be better at understanding their system, we said, okay, what we're going to do today is create a context diagram of the system as is. I really have no clue why this happens, but everyone wants to draw the system as it will be. And then why this happens, I don't know. So no, if you're going to do this and you have never done anything like this, draw what's there right now, not what is going to be there in 3 months or in 3 weeks or tomorrow, today. So very clear, everyone knows, do you know how to do C4? Everyone said yes, except someone that said no, but that always happens. But we're like, okay, just do what you can. This drawing or model, what you're trying to do is, why it's important to model is because you're trying to structure how people are thinking, trying to give them some rule guide on how to put their ideas about the system together. So this is why teaching the tool is so important. So with the goal set, we move to Alone Together. We set a timer for about 5 minutes. And during this time, each of the participants kind of modeled this. This is a blurred out, zoomed out version of what they actually did. And so you can't see the details. What you can see is that they're widely different, right? It's like they're very, very different. And they're all the same system. When they started talking about it, there was a lot of commonalities. One thing that, well, as I mentioned before, this different role person, they drew this diagram that is quite disjointed, but it included a lot of stuff that the other ones didn't. So bringing diversity of roles to this is super powerful. The part where everyone listens to each other was super interesting here, because they were really like surprised about how much in common they had. And I think they didn't expect that would be happening, including the new person. There was someone new there that had been there for like 2 weeks, and they were able to draw something that was, kind of lacking in detail, but still it wasn't miles away from anyone else. So, new people are encouraged to be there too, because they will make some guesses, and some of the guesses are right, which is good. So they did along together, and then they moved to consensus. The team drew part of the system, and the problem that they found is that they couldn't finish. I mean, imagine this, they're doing this really high level context thing, and they were like, but wait, couldn't we stay longer? And I said no, because I was hosting the session. And I was like, the good news about this is that it was just 50 minutes. We can just, have another session in a week or two and do it. So in the summary, they said that they learned a lot. They were very happy with the format, and they wanted to do it again soon to finish the diagram, right? So that's what happened in this first session for them. Obviously, there's a lot more detail about this that you can find on the website for Bytesize, and that's bytesizearchitecturesessions.com. And this is an interlude for parrots. Right, so the next thing that we're going to look at is another industry example, right? So this is about what can you do with many Bytesize sessions together, right? Things that I have done with this is a target architecture and this inter-team collaboration are the kind of salient, very well-defined examples. But sometimes you just need to do a few sessions to do something, and it depends on your problem, right? I think this one is a really nice example because after a few sessions, you got something really concrete out of it. So when I worked in in a TV broadcasting industry in the UK, we had to do some major improvements to the video pipeline for video on demand. So what that means is if you imagine a service kind of like Netflix, not Netflix, and you are searching for Cats Are Great or whatever on Netflix, and you have some video, you click on it. Not the part of finding the video, but the actual bit of playing the video, which really, really actually needs to work and be snippy, right? That's the bit that we were working on, right? On making sure that we could actually play the video. Because this company is quite, it's been there since the 70s. They have some really new systems to do the whole video on demand things, but they have some systems that have been there for quite a long time. So some of the systems we had to interact with had a lot of historical complexity, like they were created for some reason, and then they were kind of adapted and adapted and adapted, sometimes not in the best way, and they were kind of doing what they needed to do, but sometimes they didn't. And we needed to update a bunch of stuff. I know this is not very clear, but it's just trying to kind of paint a picture of where we were. We knew that the work needed to include 3 teams, and we organized a few Bytesize architecture sessions with 2 programmers from each team and a tech lead that was kind of knowledgeable about kind of across a few of the teams. We asked product if they wanted to be involved But because of the relationship inside those teams between the engineers and product decided to delegate part of the attendance to the Bytesize to the programmers, which I thought was actually a huge kind of trust bonus. So that meant that we had 7 or 8 people in the meeting. Sorry, I can't remember exactly. So that's the setup for what we were trying to do, who was there. And what we were trying to achieve is these major improvements to the pipeline. So to start with, we kind of thought, okay, we need to start with what's actually there. You can't plan something if you don't know where you are, right? So the first session, we modeled the interactions between the 3 teams. The actual diagrams we drew were a lot more detailed, but they wouldn't be very useful in a talk. So I kind of abstracted away this into team 1 services, team 2 services, and team 3 services. As the session was happening, so this is the first session that we did on trying to draw the current state. What happened during the session was that when we were in alone together and we started going through, well, I think, let's say I was speaking, I would be like, well, I think that my team services, let's say I'm team 2, I would be very detailed about that. But when it came to interactions with team 1 and team 3, I mean, I thought I understood how that worked, but when I started drawing it, there was it was very fuzzy, and there was like, well, I don't know what they do with this information. Now, my experience was repeated by everyone else. Everyone else had this kind of fuzzy, for me, it was team 2 was nice, green, super sharp. But then team 1 was like fuzz, with like fogs on whatever. So obviously, when we started putting all of this together and in consensus, it was like really nice because all of us had loads of questions. And at the end, we had something quite rich that we all understood much better. The diagram at the end was like, wow, this is a lot messier than we thought it should be. But we were happy because we understood where we were standing better. So that was the first session. And this happened, we did go over time a bit, but only by like 10 or 15 minutes, which is magical, I think, given where we started. We waited a little bit, like maybe a couple of weeks, and we did another session. So this session was supposed to be about finding the ideal solution, right? We started off with where are we? Next step, where would we want to be? Let's imagine what would be the best solution we could come up with. And the reason to go here is because it's easier to think about ideal because people will tend to go to the same place where if you tell them, get me the fastest, sometimes people go and like, it's very hard to normalize. So the plan was do a current ideal and what we can actually do. That was my idea of how we could make this work. So anyway, we are in Alone Together and people start drawing. And what happened is, we were about 7 or 8 people there. We finished the silent time and we start going through the part where you explain the solution. And most of us kind of did similar stuff that was, good. As in, we knew that we had 6 months tops on when to deliver this. What 2 of the people did is they just went really ideal, right? It involved changes to third parties. It involved a bunch of extra, like, sparkling things and rainbows. And it would have been really, really nice to do that. However, in doing that, we started, we went to consensus and we started discussing this. What happened in not a lot of time is that we all converged and with some of the ideas from the rainbows and ponies ideas and a lot of the rest of us had done, we arrived into something that just kind of worked and we could do it. And we were all kind of looked at it and went like, wow, actually, we could deliver this. And it felt really nice because we were like, well, actually, we don't need a third session. We can just, we know that the other thing is much better, but we can deliver this now. And this will make our current systems a lot better. We will be able to do the work that needs to be done. So now it's just a question of kind of going through some of the details of what the contracts look like, how the APIs have changed, etc. So what we did is we finished the session extremely happy because we reached a really good compromise that we all understood the side effects of. So after that, we actually wrote down some ADRs. And actually, we had a few extra details to work out. And we actually implemented it and delivered it, which is awesome. If you want to read a little bit more about that, you can find it in this book in chapter 17. It's actually an excellent book. So if you haven't read it, I highly recommend it. And well, since part of my work is there, I'm always happy to kind of go like, oh, this is nice. But just to kind of give you, just to TLDR this, what happened, because sometimes I can tell the story and it sounds like, oh, that sounds good. So what happened here is you had to coordinate collaboration and changes for 3 teams. And in 2 meetings, that's done. Now, okay, maybe all the stars aligned and everything worked well, and this is the most ideal way in which you could ever collaborate. I'll accept that is possible, but it happened, right? So, I mean, maybe you have not the most perfect conditions and you need to have 4 of these still, because of you have the format that allows you to think about where is it that you were and what is it that you want to do. And maybe you needed to have a third, okay, what is the compromise? You're enabled to do this, and you're able to achieve efficiency, and also you're kind of happy to make this work without more friction, right? To make the cherry on the top, all of this was documented because we had you just needed to write some notes about what the diagrams meant, and the ADR kind of helped us make sure we got the feedback from the teams about like, oh, concretely, these are all the details. And obviously from there, creating more documentation is easy because you have top down and you can have the context. So very, very happy with that. So that's the end of the example. And I need to show this slide on the foundational pieces because I have cats, right? And I think from the conversation we've been having, from your questions, and also how what I'm trying to show here, a lot of the stuff that happens in Bytesize requires psychological safety. Like, you need to be able to talk to the people that you're collaborating with. So if you don't have that, it's very hard for this or really any other technique to work. I think this can foster it, but organizationally, you have to enable people to talk to each other. Right. I also think that, and I really, really like this video from Ross Akoff. It's about systems. If you haven't watched it, I highly, highly recommend it. In the video, he says that a system is not the sum of its parts, it's their interactions. And I think what I really like to make an kind of, hey, pay attention to this. It's talking about the parts. And I think in software, we tend to forget that we're part of the systems, and our interactions with each other, especially when we talk about our models and how our systems work, is an essential part of building systems. So in conclusion, to build systems, you need to share knowledge. This is essential. There is a variety of tools to enable effective and efficient knowledge sharings. One of them is Bytesize. You can try it, but this is just one of many. I am an advocate of the thing I built, obviously. I think it works because it's worked for me. But if you take anything from this, just take the fact that find one that works for you. And yeah, with that, I want to thank you and give you many pictures of parrots. And I wonder if you have any questions.
I have a lot.
Yay!
I'm not sure where to start. So I'll start with the comment from Jackie. I think this is an excellent way to elicit information from people, especially information that has yet to be written down.
Yes, absolutely. It's a quite. I think if you have some sort of idea of, if you have a guiding thing of something that you know it's missing, it's a really enabling format. I see a lot of emergence. Basically, from Jackie's comment, what I hear is like, oh, this seems like something that enables conversations.
Mm-hmm.
And absolutely, yes, I am very happy with seeing that happening.
Yeah. So I have a question about that. But maybe I will start with I was expecting more alpacas than parrots, but
yes, also this is supposedly a llama, but I will fight you for it. But the parrots, that's all right. I don't really know for sure if this diagram, like this thing, how would you tell from this picture? But yeah, no, I migrated to parrots because parrots are really cool.
Yeah.
They're very smart. And also, do you know anything about the Kia parrot?
I don't think so.
So this is a parrot that lives in the South Island of New Zealand, and it's like they only live in that area, and they're really really curious. Like they had to become really smart to survive, and they're awesome. They're super curious. They go and destroy things, and also they take rides on cars to go under a bridge. They're hilarious. Totally look up Kias, like KEAs. Kia parrots, very cool. Also, they look amazing when they're flying, super colorful and stuff.
I will need. Oh, I see that there are llamas on the left side. Actually.
Yeah, at the end there was some llamas left behind for as a to see if anyone can see them. See, there's like one there, one there. There might be a third one.
Okay. So coming back to what Jackie said, when I'm thinking about the workshop formats, then I'm still unsure is whether they are more like a smoke and the mirrors to push us to work with each other. And I'm curious about your thoughts, how much it's the success of the workshop type of the workshop. Like even storming, also bite-size architecture sessions are related to the fact that we are taking the right people together and we have a specific format. So how do you think how format is important in all of that?
Right. Okay. So I think the question that I'm hearing is something like there are these different when it comes to workshops, there is these different formats. What is the good thing about like why this format is better than the other one, or is that the question?
No, it's more like maybe I will start with the event storming because that's something the workshop type that I'm the most familiar with. So I like doing that. I see that it's working effectively, and sometimes I'm thinking, why is it working well? Is it really about the sticky notes? Is it really about the events, or is it more that we precisely know that those are the rules, so we don't need to discuss and maybe argue about the rules. We might not like some of the rules, but if we see that in overall they are working and we are taking all those peoples together to discuss that. So I'm just curious whether it's the specific format of the workshop is more important than the fact that we have the certain the certain ways how we should do stuff, and that we are doing that together. So
okay, so it's something about okay. So what I'm thinking is the question is something like the workshop formats that we do, event storming, Bytesize, enable us to do something that we don't generally do if you put the same people but you don't give them this constraint.
Yeah, exactly.
And so why does that work? And I don't know. I mean, I have done event storming, but I haven't kind of come up with it. But I can tell you for Bytesize, this is something that for me, I could see that it. We've done some meetings without doing, like, sometimes it was like, let's draw some diagrams, and sometimes it was like, the problem is that there's always the same person drawing the diagram. But all of us are here and we have brains and hands. Why can't we also draw it? And also maybe we'll learn something. So I think it grew out of trying to improve incrementally on something that I saw as a problem. It's like, well, we're losing all this precious feedback just because we're waiting on this, either one person or someone has a whiteboard, and like I have a whiteboard here, which you can't see, but it's here. And but it's like, but there's lots of markers. Why couldn't we all draw there and make it fun? Initially, I thought it was faster, but what I realized is that it's not about speed. It's about being able to sync the ideas. I think if I had to answer your question, by the way, excellent question, on basically what is it about workshops that make it so powerful? It's kind of like a speed up on a video game, right? And I think it's about focusing on one particular aspect of something. So for event storming is events. For Bytesize is about the alone together, and then they basically having that time of you work on your own on something, and then you do the same thing all together, having all that context, right? So what you're trying to do there is listen to people. But first, at first you're saying listen to yourself.
Yeah.
Then you're saying listen to everyone. And then you're like, okay, now you have a picture of what they're kind of thinking, and that makes it easier for you to understand where they come from when you're trying to work together. You're like, this person is thinking that the system kind of looks like this. In fact, they just showed me a picture that they built. So it's easier to empathize with that than with, like, sometimes people talk and you're like, what are they saying? So you're removing that from it because you know exactly what they're saying because they just told. So I think it's about that enabling constraint type thing.
Yeah, thank you. That makes perfect sense to me, especially adding into that the psychological safety that you highlighted a few times. So I'm personally an introvert, and even though I'm like facilitating workshops, taking part on them, but it's always draining my batteries pretty fast. So the part about alone together is quite important for me. It's not only, I think that it's more like for me, like an urban legend that we tell, like, there is this one guy that was quiet for a whole meeting and then suddenly he came with the best idea. But I think that even this is an urban legend in most of the times, then it's showing something that is really important and that we sometimes missing. Like I'm also doing that part in my workshop, usually to reduce the power imbalance, because, for example, we have a CTO on the meetup and on the workshop, or the manager, and then, as you said, there is this guy that comes to the drawing, and either are afraid or shy, as Jackie told, or just following the leader and not
you have
getting involved.
The hippo problem, right? The highest person paid or whatever it's called. And that's also where I really want that. Basically, if I'm hosting a session, especially, I push quite hard for you come to this thing, you also work. Not just don't bring just opinions. If you want to give an opinion, you also need to do the work. Again, sometimes you can do what you can do, right?
Yeah, yeah.
But that's the idea, and it's exactly for that reason. What you don't, the power imbalance is always in place, and you're trying to kind of suspend that for a bit. Especially because you give it a focus, right? The focus is this, and we all win if we have a better view of what we're doing. So you're trying to remove some of these problems, but obviously they still exist.
Yeah, I fully agree. I also read recently that even if you are a leader and you want to not only to facilitate and to get the best ideas, then it's best if you speak at the end. And it's not only because you will hear all of the good ideas, or probably some terrible ideas, but also because if you start talking earlier, then you might miss some important facts, and you might be this dumb person with the terrible idea. And then if some of people on the workshop came with a really good idea, then you can even say like, yeah, I know it, this is a really great idea. Like it should be also self-defense for leaders to be the last person speaking. And
Yeah.
I think that this alone together also enables that part.
Yeah, it gives also, you already thought about it without, you don't, it's not someone talks and
Yeah,
then
exactly.
So there is like, what are we doing? And then you immediately go to work. So nobody gets ideas into your head, like for any one of the participants' head. And also, this is why it's so important to try to not not try to leave what is it that we're working on until the very end, like decide during the meeting. You might have a general idea about where you're going, but it's good to decide at that point. That way you cannot avoid this, like, oh, I actually thought that we would be doing this, so I worked on this diagram all night, or or something kind of like that, because it's kind of like what you're trying is that people work together during the thing. I mean, thank you, person that worked really hard to make this happen. It was that really useful, because now all the other people haven't done this work. We didn't agree together that that's what we were doing. So yeah, so power imbalance is a tough one that I like trying to learn and understand about how power affects our systems, because it's a huge influence in socio-technical systems.
Yeah, that's also why I like the bite-size architecture idea, because those pieces are coming together. It's like building the environment that will help us to get best out of us. That's how I see that.
Well, thanks. I hope you try it and let me know if it does, because it's an attempt to go in that direction. At the same time, if people have troubles saying hello to each other, there's no workshop format. There's a lot of stuff you need to do that might just, not work.
Yeah, I agree. So especially the consensus part is something that as I noticed, we humans are not great at getting into consensus. Quite often compromise is the best we can get. So I'm curious also, because you mentioned host and like moderating, like again, I will use the event storming as a reference, but not just to compare those methods, but more as an example of what I'm asking. So in event storming, there is this facilitator that should not be involved in doing real work, more taking care about the process. So is it in bite-size architecture session, especially on the consensus part, do you often also put someone as the facilitator role, or it's more like ensemble, so working together?
So that is an excellent question, because I think I hate doing this, but it depends. I think a host, not really a facilitator, I think a host that kind of is happy to keep people on the, hey, basically the host needs to say something like, hey, in the first step in the goal, we agreed that this is what we're doing. You're starting to talk about something else. Can we bring it back? Basically, that's the whole thing you need to do as a host. But I think especially during the first few times people are doing this, it's good to have someone that is a designated host. I think once people, third, fourth session, again, depending on how much the team knows each other, how much they want to do it, that they want to make it like work, you don't need the host anymore. Or maybe you need a host to just help you kind of structure how maybe you want to make many sessions happen together. Just an idea of like what is the general direction of multiple sessions. But if you have a team that wants to do it, they don't need it. They can just kind of go like, right, well, let's try to keep it in time, and that's it. That would be my my comment there. On the thing that we were just talking about, I want to add something that is really important. The consensus part of Bytesize. One interesting thing about this is that the level of consensus you get is still some consensus, including no consensus. If people, or if everyone doesn't agree on anything, that's the start of something. Probably not a great start, but at least you know that that is what's happening. If you have 6 people that can't agree on anything, I mean, you have a massive problem, but at least now you know that you have that problem. That means you can start addressing it. Before you did that, you didn't realize that that was what was happening.
Yeah, so you at least you drawn the picture of the team as it is. So you did accidentally a bite-sized session about your team constellation.
Yeah, and that is useful. So it's like, okay, we're in a very bad place. How can we move on? Because you're trying to draw an existing system, right? So it's not like a fabricated thing that you might have. You are trying to draw something. So if people don't agree at all and they're like shouting at each other, then you kind of know, right, we have a problem. And the problem is not the system itself, the software system. The problem here is that people are not able to actually discuss in any good way what are they building. If they can't talk about a diagram, how could they possibly build software together?
Yeah, yeah. So
right?
I think that's I have such thought that it's also intriguing, especially in the context. I had a question to note, but I think that I know the answer now. Like, what do you mean by system? But it seems that it is both the technical design, but also the people, like you said. Like if we see that we even can't cope with drawing a diagram, then that tells also about our system as built with the technical and product stuff we are building, but also the people involved, right?
I think our systems are socio-technical, right? So when I say a software system, I could refer to, and I'm kind of not very good at kind of having a very consistent language when we're speaking so informally, but a software system can be the actual software. But when I say system, as in our system, I tend to refer to the socio-technical system. And if you don't believe me, or if you kind of, maybe we can find better words for this, but imagine in your team, I don't know where you work or any of you work, I don't know. Just imagine nobody turns up for work. Just leave your software systems to run. How long in hours or days does it take for everything to stop working? Or even just some very important thing? A couple of days? Maybe a few hours? Because all the incidents, none of you are at work, nobody. So are those software systems actually capable of existing without your help? And if you're essential, aren't you part of it?
Yeah.
That's at least a way that I find it easy to bridge the gap. I also think that you can't grow the systems without people. Like they even if they have some sort of self-repairing capabilities, you still need to have people that actually write them and make them do something new, you know?
Yeah, I fully agree. And Jackie wrote on the chat that it is always the people as well. They are part of the technical system. And I think Gerald Weinberg said it's always people problem.
Yes, it
That's the
is.
rule.
Yes,
Um,
totally.
so to reiterate what you said about the consensus. So it is fine to, as a result of that session, to get like a snapshot and calling let's agree to disagree for now and schedule the next session. Or I mean, it's not a perfect ending, I would say, but is it fine? Or
I think I have done that and that has worked. I also have done that and that didn't work. So, but the reasons why it didn't work and why it worked are extremely contextual. This is where it gets to like the all it depends, because we're talking about like a particular group of people not agreeing on a system that it would be really hard for to be described on this setting, right? But if I had to like extrapolate it to something that you can take away, it is always something like, is this a problem of the stuff that you're like of the goal of the session, or is this a problem that it has to do actually with the people involved in this? And in the time where it succeeded, it was like, oh no, we can't agree. Oh, okay, we need to actually go and find out more about what is the code actually doing. Basically, we need to do some research. So that was solved with offline. You can go do some research, come back, say, oh, you know, we were both wrong, or this is what it's actually doing. You investigate together and you move on. When there's a people problem, and you know, let's say, Oscar, I hate you because your dog smells or whatever, you know, it obviously I'm just making fun of something, but it can be, you know, some people just don't get along.
Yes.
And sometimes there's real problems, like, you know, this guy, this other guy, I don't know. So if it's the second category, doing that won't help. uh, Most of the times you kind of need to find a way to address that, or hope that people can work together, or maybe managers will get involved and deal with that. But basically it kind of goes a little bit beyond the scope of what a workshop format can do, right? This is more like management problems.
Yeah.
You know, so yeah. So if you're falling on the we just don't have enough information, yes, we can deal with that. I also, there is a thing of, can people bridge this problem? Maybe the best thing you can do is, if it's a personal problem, the best thing you can do is split the session in two and have one with a group and one of the people that have a problem, then you have another one, and then you try to do something about putting them together, trying to kind of avoid the problem if you can. Because the reality is that we all need to just keep working. Sometimes these personal issues, don't go away, and if they do, they take quite a long time in being resolved. So why put these two people into like a really horrible state? Like basically you're not helping them by putting them together, so don't.
Yeah, so I think that it's also a chance to reset the discussion. Like, I'm not sure. I hope that you won't feel offended because, but I thought that this bite-sized session reminds me a bit about the Pomodoro technique. Like,
oh no, this is a compliment.
Yeah. So it's like Pomodoro, but for workshops. Like,
oh my gosh, that's great. This is kind of pretty much, yeah. I think Pomodoro technique is so simple and yet so powerful. Like millions of people around the world, you know, just find it as an excellent, you know, efficiency technique. And I actually do think that if I'm able, like basically, if this thing gives you some of that, and for a team, just think about how much money one meeting costs. Imagine if this makes you 5% more effective. You just saved like so much money. And I'm trying to kind of put in money terms something that we all intuit, which is like, let's just not waste time in meetings, or let's make meetings better. The meetings are necessary, right? We need meetings to actually work because that's how we share information synchronously. And we need to share information synchronously sometimes, not all the time. There's many meetings that could be an email. Let's not go there. But imagine if we make them just a little bit better, a little bit less boring, a little bit more, hey, we got something done. If we do that, that's actually why I'm happy talking about it and spending time and effort, and maybe made like a not very pretty website about it, because I think people are doing the bite-sized sessions and they are finding that meetings are slightly more efficient, and that makes me happy.
Yeah. Yeah, I had this thought about the Pomodoro because it's like it's short and intensive, and it's like built to, if you have those breaks and you have this span of focus, then at least you can be more encouraged to do that if you know that it won't last too long. And also the thing about those heated discussions that we also discuss right before that is that you know, if you are getting, I'm getting issues like I'm too often spending too long time during sitting on the same issue, and then I get overheated. My brain is overheated, and I just realized that when I finally move out of my desk, that I spend like 4 hours, and I almost don't remember what did I just did. And if I just look back, then it appears that I didn't do much. I just tried. I thought that I'm in a flow, but it was just wrong vision of what I was doing. So probably if I had those breaks, then it would be more effective, or at least I would realize earlier that what I'm doing is wrong. So I'm not sure if that's aligned with your vision of the.
Yeah, I think especially, I mean, on the flow, that's definitely a thing. But I think when it comes to meetings, I think if they're a lot longer than an hour, people are just not actually present. Like, I've been to workshops where you could easily see there was like 3 people working and the rest were like, oh my God, kill me. You know, like, especially when you go into the 3-4 hour mark or the whole day, towards the end of the day, like, just people, it's not that they were being rude or mean, or they were not, there was just too much, especially introvert people. Like, you mentioned you're introverted, and maybe I don't look it, but I'm also introverted. Like, I'm very high energy, but at some point I run out, and I run out completely out. I'm just off. I'm like, bye.
Yeah, same.
So in a situation of a very long workshop, I mean, I might be able to cope for like a few hours, but after that, I don't want to go to the pub or anywhere. I just want to hide under a blanket. Uh, and I've kind of wondered, how can they be effective if, you know, there's a lot of introverts in the world. Right? So I don't know. But yeah, I think that keeping it short enables a bunch of things, and also having time between the sessions. Like, if you do something today, what I notice a lot is, remember on the first example that I gave, after I finished this, the team were DMing me. They were like, hey, when are we doing this thing again? And I was like, I don't know. You know, we need to like arrange it. And they were like, oh, I was thinking that thing. And this was different people saying, like, if they were excited about a diagram. I mean, imagine that. They were trying to keep going. And the best thing is, they had time to think, you know, offline about this. That means they got, like, they maybe were curious and went and checked some stuff on the code. That's much better than not doing the bite-size session. Right? Because they all got this thing, and then they were like, oh, that's really cool. What about this? What about that? What about this other thing? And then, you know, they did the next session and they were flying. Because, by the way, we did do a second session and they did finish the context diagram, and they were very happy. And they were like, oh, we're going to keep doing this. And I was like, yeah. And it's like, are you going to host us? And I was like, you're ready to host it yourself. And they were so happy, right? It's like they were like, oh, we can do this. And it's like, yeah, you don't need me. You can just do it yourselves. Which is great, you know. That's also why I like sharing this, because it's not like it feels good that you're giving something to people, and then they kind of, it's like teaching a man to fish for reals, you know.
Yeah, yeah. I really enjoyed that, and I really like it, especially that it's really aligned with how I see stuff, or maybe because of that, like we know we like things that we do also on ourselves. Like for example, this starting with as it is and then discussing how it should be. That's also quite, because I'm helping people to move to event sourcing, and of course rarely that those are really green fields. Usually those are products that people want to introduce that to some part, or they would like to do more event driven way. And one of the challenges that I see is that people try to model both at once. So the scenario, this is how we have it on our legacy current design, and this is how we should be. And from my perspective, it's usually a recipe for a disaster, because those people that build this previous software, it's like their child, and they feel that they are criticized. And so if we do both at once, then from my perspective, it's not a great idea. And if we show that, see, this is where we are, and this is where we want to be, let's find the common ground, then I think it's easier to have a valuable discussion, because as you said and highlighted a few times, it's better for the psychological safety, I think.
Also it's even better if you can get people that built the old system to kind of go like, you know, that they see, oh, we could make this better. And in fact, because they built the old system, they will come up with much better options than someone that hasn't, because they understand the domain and the intricacies of the system. Like, because, a system that is like many years old is extremely rich in its interactions. And yes, you can go and read the code, but there's nothing like the people that navigated the labyrinth of the solution, to then that those same people are the ones that kind of, oh, we are now thinking about this in a very different way. Let's navigate this labyrinth again, but let's see how we can make it better. Like if it's their idea, it's going to be better. Also, they're the ones that probably need to maintain it. So
yeah, I fully agree. Okay, I see that we are slowly getting to the hard limit, like on the Bytesize session. And so I wanted to, as an ending, ask you, like, what are your advices on, like, maybe the best practices, but also worst practices to maybe trying to avoid, but also those that you would recommend when trying to do bite-sized session in your team? Like, do you have some?
It's funny. I never, like, this is the first time I got asked this. So best and worst practices when running bite-sized sessions. I think when it comes to worst is, let's start with like bad and then end with good, I guess. The worst thing to do for yourself would be to try to put too much pressure, or try to have some very, oh, let's build the world, or let's start with a target architecture. I think if you want to just try it out in the small. Just, grab your team and do what you have there. See how the team likes it. So worst practice, people observing. Do not do, like as explained. Very bad. Another bad practice, not preparing people. This is the most common one. It's like, oh yeah, we're gonna do C4. Then someone sends like the address of C4 model.com and hopes for the best. People are going to feel really uncomfortable, and then they are going to have a bad time. I think these are the main, don't do these things, because it just makes everything worse. I think we mentioned them, but it's good to kind of highlight them. On the best practices is nearly the flip side of that. It's like, make people comfortable. Basically, think about how your meeting will go, and think about the people that you know are going to be there. You know them. What will make them happier? How are they going to be better at, talking about this? If you know someone's shy, just reach out to them and say, hey, this might be difficult for you. This is why it's important, right? Basically, warm up people if you reckon that might be a thing. Share the tools. If you're gonna try some new modeling thing, you need to tell people why this is a good idea and prepare them. So everything here, as you can see, is about make sure people are ready. A good pattern is also be very clear about the goal. So the meeting is starting, you're setting up a goal. Make sure everyone actually knows. There's only a handful, like 8, 10 of you. If it's a video call, just look at each one of those little black windows, and that are not black because you're all on video on camera, and say, hey, are you okay? Are you ready? Say, please give me a thumbs up that you're ready. Or actually unmute yourselves, like, some sort of, strange thing. On the flip side of that, actually, on the anti-patterns, I will add one more, not putting your camera on. And the reason for that is that verbal communication is difficult enough without basically speaking like this. I'm on camera, you can see my hands, and I'm doing stuff. And when you say something, I go like, what? When I don't understand and stuff. Basically, non-verbal comms is extremely rich. So if you're online, having a camera on is very useful. I understand also that for some people this is quite hard, but it does help a lot to see how people are reacting to things that are being said. So, negotiate it with your team. Okay. And the final best practice is basically aim to have fun. It's like a crazy idea. Have fun at work. But if you aim for that, you're gonna get so much more out of any meeting, really, but especially Bytesize, because it's designed for collaboration.
Yeah, I think that's a great last point about Bytesize session. So yeah, I second also the point about turning on cameras. So yeah, thank you. So thank you, Andrea. I really enjoyed that. I also had the chance to ask questions, and people also, I think, enjoy it. So thank you for joining us today. I'm sure that it was a really interesting things, and I definitely will try to use such format in my workshop, or at least a part of them. So I hope that people will also try. And so for the people that are rewatching that, please share with us your thoughts when you try that, or maybe some other things. I think that you can also even reach Andrea. I saw that there are already some lessons learned and case studies from people
Absolutely.
using on the website.
I love to hear case studies. If you run this and you want to add it, basically, some people wrote them down, and we just put it on the website, because I'm obviously going to share my experiences, but having other people share theirs, I think is quite nice to, see it from a different perspective. And it's funny because the experiences are quite similar. Like if you go to the website, you'll find them there. Like some people try some slightly lighter versions of Bytesize, and some other people kind of go all in, and it really depends on their problems.
Yeah, I think that definitely it's at least worth trying and playing with that and having some fun, and then trying to find our own way of handling that. I think
Indeed.
it's enough flexible format for that.
Exactly.
Okay.
Oscar, thanks a million. Oscar and everyone that turned up, thank you so much for your time and your questions. I had a great time and I hope it was useful. And yeah, see you the next time.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you all that joined. Thanks, Martin wrote that. Thank you for the presentation, Jackie also, and some people earlier that had to drop. They seem to enjoy that, so thank you. See ya.
All right. See you. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.